This culture is exposing deeper cracks in society, and it's happening everywhere. Not just in one place, not just in one group, and not just in one city. It's showing up in different forms of the world, but the emotion underneath it feels strangely familiar no matter where you are. And the conversation always starts the same way online in everyday spaces. People are trying to make sense of what they are seeing in public spaces, in schools, neighborhoods, and transport systems, in entertainment, and even in how young people behave in groups. And instead of just reaching to the surface, a deeper question keeps coming up again and again. This is David 360. What happens when a generation of young people starts being labeled in a way that shapes how everyone else sees them, and eventually how they see themselves? Because once a label becomes popular, it stops being just slang. It becomes a lens through which people see them. And that lens starts to shape fear, assumptions, and even expectations. Now, let me be clear. This isn't a conversation about one group of people being the problem. That's too simple. And honestly, it misses the real issue entirely. What we are actually looking at is something more complicated. How modern youth culture, economic pressure, identity confusion, and social media narratives are interacting in ways that are producing tension between generations and communities. You see, when it comes to older people, when you see older people talk about kids these days with frustration, or the youth of today with frustration, you see it when young people feel misunderstood or unfairly judged before they even speak. And you see it when entire communities start to feel like they are being defined by the most visible or most chaotic moments, instead of the everyday reality of ordinary life. Across different countries, cities, towns, villages, or what have you, even in church communities, the pattern changes shape but not direction. In some places, it shows up as concern about youth violence or public disorder. In others, it shows up as anxiety about disrespect in schools or breakdown in social norms. In some urban centers, it shows up as fear from business owners or residents who feel like public spaces no longer feel predictable or safe. But underneath all of it, the emotional structure is similar. People feel like things are shifting too fast, and they are not sure who or what is responsible. And this is where the conversation becomes sensitive, because when societies feel this kind of pressure, they often try to find a simple explanation, a single group, a single behavior, a single cultural trend. But real life rarely works that way. What's actually happening is a mix of factors stacking on each other: economic stress, youth unemployment in many regions, many states, many countries, weak community structures in some cases, changing family dynamics, and a digital environment that amplifies the most extreme or most emotional content, because that's what spreads faster. Let's say post and it will go within a twinkle of an eye. So what gets pushed to the surface is not always the full picture. It's often just the loudest version of it. You wouldn't get the full picture. There is also something deeper happening with identity. Young people today, my dear, are growing up in a world where identity is constantly performed online, shaped online. Style, language, behavior, and even conflict. At the same time, older generations are often trying to interpret this behavior through the lens of how they were raised. In our days, where public behavior was expected to follow stricter social rules and clearer boundaries. So both sides are often looking at the same reality, but through completely different expectations. That gap creates misunderstanding, and misunderstanding over time turns into judgment. But here's where the conversation needs balance, because every society has always had problem youth narratives in some form. Every generation has had moments where older people felt like things were breaking down, and every generation also produces young people who go on to build, innovate, lead, and reshape the world in positive ways. So all is not lost. The difference today is visibility. Everything is recorded. Today, everything is recorded. Everything becomes content. Everything is shared. everything is amplified. So a small moment can suddenly feel like a widespread cultural identity, even when it is not representative of everyone involved. You can stay in a small corner, group of people, record a conversation, put it online, it becomes public property. You see. Still, it would be dishonest to ignore the fact that some communities are experiencing real challenges. There are places where youth behavior, lack of opportunity, and weak institutional supports are creating environments where tension is more visible. There are also places where the relationship between the young people and authority has become strained, not necessarily because of one side alone, but because trust has eroded over time. And when trust, my dear ones, when trust breaks down, interpretation becomes harsher on both sides. Adults see risk more easily. Young people feel judged more quickly. You see, and every interaction becomes more loaded than it needs to be. So the real question is not whether this culture is good or bad. The real question is what conditions are producing the behaviors people are reacting to, and why are those conditions becoming more common in so many different places at the same time? Because if you only focus on behavior without context, you end up treating symptoms. But if you look at the structure, education, opportunity, community stability, media influence, and generational communication, you start to see a much bigger picture. And in that bigger picture, something becomes clear. Most people are not trying to destroy anything. Most people are trying to navigate environments that are changing faster than the systems around them can adapt. That is how the youth behave these days. Some do it well, some struggle, some get lost in the process. But reducing all of that complexity into a single cultural label doesn't explain the problem, it just simplifies it. At the end of the day, every society is asking the same quiet question in its own way. How do we maintain order, identity, and safety while still allowing space for change, youth expression, and movement? If the balance tips too far in either direction, tension grows. Too rigid, the society becomes closed and stagnant. Too loose, and society becomes fragmented and uncertain. The challenge is not choosing one side. It's building systems and cultures strong enough to hold both. And that is the part most conversations miss, even though it is the part that determines where everything goes next. Thank you for staying with us. This is David 360. I'll see you in my next video. God bless you.